Hey guys, so this is a quick video about the 2006 FRQ2, and I'm kind of looking at different pieces of satire. The College Board does occasionally include satire on the exam, sometimes in the multiple choice. Every couple of years, maybe every 10 years or so, they do a piece of satire as an FRQ. It's interesting to see that we had the Henry James 2004 FRQ that we've already looked at had satirical undertones. And then 2 years later, they included this excerpt from Oscar Wilde's Lady Windemere's Fan as the FRQ2, which was another satire piece. You kind of have to wonder if the College Board saw that people missed satire in 2004 and brought it back 2 years later to see if anybody, caught it again, if teachers started teaching it again or people kind of started thinking about satire a bit more. So what we are going to do today with this piece is I'm asking students to read it and then go back to that same FRQ handout that we use with the 2008 Hawthorne piece, with the 2004 Henry James piece, and kind of fill out that handout again, where you identify the task, you identify 3 main points you'd like to make, then you go through and you identify the deeper meaning, so a thematic context or a thematic element that you would tie everything back to. You maybe want to note any devices, although this FRQ's task is a little bit different. So maybe note a device here or there. And then I'm going to ask you to craft a thesis statement. So what I'd like you to do right now is pause this video, go and read the Oscar Wilde piece. It's posted on Schoology. It's the 2006 FRQ2. And take a few minutes to work through this handout. When you're done, come back to this video and we'll talk a little bit about the piece itself. Waiting for you to pause. Okay, so now that you've read the piece and you've worked through the handout here, which I do think this handout is a really helpful tool in breaking down the FRQ, helping you think about if you were to write it, what this could look like. So as we look at the piece from Lady Windemere's Fan, we have to keep a couple of things in mind. One, Oscar Wilde is a satirical writer. He was involved in the upper classes of British society. He was extremely well educated, y'all. He was so smart. Punny, witty, clever. He really got a thrill out of making money from these satirical plays in which high-class British society, the aristocracy, would come and watch the plays and get made fun of, and Wilde made a living off of that. He thought it was really, really quite clever and quite brilliant. So Lady Windemere's Fan was one of his very first plays. Before writing Lady Windemere's Fan, he was predominantly a poet, a lecturer, like traveling lecturist on classical linguistics. Again, very, very smart. But Lady Windemere's Fan was his first major foray into playwriting and satirical writing. So as we read through this passage, let me get out my copy here. Let's look first at the prompt itself. So it says, the following passage is an excerpt from Lady Windemere's Fan, a play by Oscar Wilde produced in 1892. So even if they don't identify this piece as satirical in the prompt, the fact that it's Oscar Wilde is a kind of a clue to that satirical element. Now, Wilde did write Dorian Gray, which is a novel, not as comedic. It's actually not very funny at all. It's kind of dark and terrifying, and it's brilliant. But even that has a dark satire to it where he's mocking the upper class. So Wilde is always going to have an element of satire to his writing, and tells you to read the passage carefully, of course. Then write a well-organized essay in which you analyze how the playwright reveals the values of the character and the nature of their society. Now, that's a clue in the prompt that this piece is satirical. If the College Board asks you to think about this piece and how it reflects on society, they're telling you that the author is making a comment about society. And most likely, that comment is going to be satirical. It's going to be making fun of society or kind of taunting society, often with comedic timing and comedic elements. So looking at the prompt, you can infer that this is a satirical piece. Now, there have been times as well where they've told you that this is a piece of satire. That's helpful, y'all, when they do that. But if they don't, look for clues like that. A recognized author or the phrasing about where they ask you to reflect on society. So the task here, your essay, if you were writing it, would be about the values of the characters and how those characters reflect on the society. And as you read this piece, you're going to notice you have three speaking characters. We have Duchess of Berwick, Lord Darlington, and Lady Windemere. And these three characters are three very different people. They each have a different set of values, a different set of morals. Each one has a kind of a different standing in society. So looking through, I have my points here that I would make about these. Windemere and the Duchess are more similar than they are to Lord Darlington. So Windemere and the Duchess of Berwick are both concerned with image. They're both concerned with social expectation. They are both a little bit gossipy in this, although Berwick is certainly worse than Windemere. If we look at just Lady Windemere here, she's very concerned with living an upright life. She has a high standard for those who come into her circle, those who come into her home. In fact, she says I will have no one in my house about whom there's any scandal. She has a very high expectation for people. But she also feels that female morality is more important than male morality. So here we have Lord Darlington, who they call, wicked or foolish, depraved. Lady Windemere is willing to accept Lord Darlington and those behaviors because he's a man, but she wouldn't accept that from a woman. So there is a sense here of a double standard, the expectation for a woman in Victorian society versus the expectation for a male in Victorian society. That's an element of social commentary. We also see here that Windemere panders to the Duchess of Berwick. Duchess comes in, she says these horrible things about Lady Markby. She is gossipy and unkind and belittling to people. And yet Windemere doesn't call her out on it. Okay, Windemere just kind of goes along with it. And in fact, Windemere starts to echo those same sentiments. So here we see Windemere pandering to the Duchess, trying to please the Duchess. This could be because the Duchess represents a higher social status. A Duchess is one of the highest rankings in the British aristocracy. It's right below the royalty. So we do have a lady here, which is a lower echelon of British aristocracy, speaking with a Duchess. So there is a sense here of maybe like social climbing or social appeal, trying to, get on Duchess Berwick's side. So even though she doesn't want anybody in her home who's scandalous, she does allow the Duchess into her home, who is not really this moral or upstanding person that Lady Windemere expects people to be. She does end up eventually inviting Lord Darlington to the party, but she does it with a stipulation that you aren't to say foolish or insecure things to people. So in this point, she is inviting Darlington in. She is recognizing that he has value and social standing, but she is also, putting an expectation on him. And he warns her here in the end that it's a dangerous thing to reform anyone. He's telling her trying to change people, expecting people to change, or changing yourself is a terrible thing. That is a bit of satire there. That is a pointed comment to Windemere, who has spent this entire passage pandering to the Duchess, changing herself for the Duchess. And again, that change may not be massive, but it is present. So when we look at Darlington, he is actually probably the only really likable character here. His name is significant, Darlington, Darling. He would be the one character, if we were watching this play, that we could identify with or possibly tolerate or like. He pretends to be a bit of a ruffian. He pretends to be a bit of a scoundrel. He's mocking and teasing, but really, y'all, he's an intellectual. He's a clever man. He has certain expectations as well. And he's very, very critical of marriage. He's critical of society. He's, in the end here, when he criticizes Lady Windemere trying to reform people, he's making a comment about, pandering to the upper classes. So he really is quite clever. He openly teases the women through this piece, which irritates them. He frustrates them with his kind of laughing nature. But we need that. We need to see some humor in this. And again, Darlington is probably the one person who appeals to us as a character. He has this part here where he talks about the game of marriage. And again, this goes back to him really questioning a social institution. But that language, oh, it's so clever. He uses this metaphor of the game, and he calls men the odd trick and the wives hold all the honors. And so this metaphor of that marriage is manipulation. Marriage is about control. And this really makes Duchess of Berwick mad. He doesn't really care. He doesn't care. He's not bothered by that. Contrast that to Lady Windemere, who isn't going to say anything to upset the Duchess. So Lord Darlington is, again, a likable character. Ultimately, in the end, he does kind of fall in line. He does get invited to the party. He does say, oh, you're beginning to reform me. We get the idea that he is going to come to the party. So there ultimately is, he falls in line with a social expectation. He is still upper class British aristocracy, but he is a little more pointed. He is a little bit more critical. And, he represents this side of the aristocracy that could be better, that has this potential for improvement, that sees some of the foolishness within the social standing. And then we get to the Duchess, who she's a snob. I don't have a better way to say that. She is bossy and manipulative and controlling, and she looks down her nose at people. She values appearance and reputation. She is a gossip. If we look at line 14, where she talks about Lady Markby, her undrinkable tea, her son-in-law supplies it. It's just, she's just biting. She's just unkind. And this is, I think, attributed to her social status. The fact that she's Duchess of Berwick. We don't get her name. We don't know anything else about her except that she's a duchess. And in her world, that's all that really matters. She can do whatever she wants. She can say whatever she wants because she has that social standing. When we see the Duchess and Windemere, it's sycophantic, right? Windemere is kind of just sucking up to the Duchess. She wants her approval. She wants her support. Lord Darlington doesn't. And that makes the Duchess so mad. She's so frustrated with him because he doesn't fall in line. She calls him names. She is, unkind towards him. And he's not really fazed by it. Ultimately, in the end, he doesn't really talk too much about her or to her. The last little bit here is between Windemere and Darlington. So Darlington gets on her nerves, frustrates her because he speaks his mind. He doesn't pander. He is clever and witty, and he can't really be controlled by her, where Windemere is controlled by her. If you'll notice, the Duchess is all about control. If you look at the way this is structured, if you look at the way this is set up, all of the longer pieces of text, all of the longer dialogue is from the Duchess. Nobody else can get a word in anywhere. She has this control over the conversation. And if you'll notice in the very, very beginning, some people get confused by this, where she says, "Dear Margaret," she's talking to Lady Windemere, "I am so pleased to see you. You remember Agatha, don't you? How do you do, Lord Darlington? I won't let you know, my daughter. You are far too wicked." Margaret is Lady Windemere. But that leaves us with the question is who is Agatha? What this means, y'all, is there's a fourth character here on the stage that never gets to say anything. Okay, and it's the Duchess's daughter. That's significant. This idea, again, about manipulation and control, and the fact that the Duchess has all of these people kind of jumping for her. And even her own child can't speak up, can't say anything, can't speak against her mother. So when we think about a deeper meaning here in the text, again, it is social commentary, it is satire. So we have to think about what is Wilde possibly saying. And there are many interpretations here. If I were writing this essay, I would talk about that there are people in the upper class aristocracy who are gossips, who are rude, who are unpleasant, like the Duchess, despite their high social position. And y'all, we see this. Just because someone is wealthy or high social standing doesn't make them a good person. Okay, so the Duchess has all of this power, all of this wealth, but she doesn't use it well. Okay, so he's criticizing this really high upper class. These upper class snobs are going to shun people who don't conform to their expectations. They're going to mock people who have different opinions. These are people who aren't really interested in the betterment of society, or really even, frankly, here with the Duchess, the betterment of herself. Okay, so Wilde is criticizing this snobbish behavior of the aristocracy. And then we have individuals within the society who have standards, like Lady Windemere. She has a moral standard for people, but she's also willing to compromise those standards, and maybe even herself, her own identity, to please the upper class. So we see Wilde commenting on kind of these tiers of society, this snobbish, horrible, super high echelon, the next level that is maybe a little bit more moral or upstanding, but panders or caters to the upper class. And then he has people like Darlington, who are upper class, who are high society. Otherwise, he would not be in the room with the Duchess and Windermere. My brain stopped for a second. But Darlington is kind, and he is observant, and he is thoughtful. And even though he disapproves of society, he criticizes society, ultimately he still has to try to fit into it a bit because of an expectation for him. He can't just walk away. So I would focus on how Wilde is commenting upon the individual values of the characters, what they individually represent within the British aristocracy. And then I would talk a bit about this dynamic that he has set up, where we have, the interplay between the powerful and those who are manipulated, and those who see that manipulation but aren't quite sure how to get away from it. That's where I would address. That's what I would go with. And I would probably structure it with leading with that theme, okay, introducing that at the very beginning, that Wilde is commenting upon the manipulation and control within the British aristocracy. I'd then go into the three characters, and in the end, I would probably come back to that concept, that deeper meaning. But again, lead with it, y'all. Your essays need to be meaning-driven, not device-driven. Now, if we notice here in this FRQ, they don't mention devices. Okay, they're not asking you to talk about tone or point of view. What they are looking for here is commentary on the society. What they are looking for here is characterization, because they specifically mention the characters. So you probably wouldn't have much device-wise to write about, except for that element of characterization. So in a thesis, I would pull that up. That Oscar Wilde, in his 1892 play Lady Windemere's Fan, uses direct and indirect characterization of three different characters to represent differing values within upper class British society. Okay, and then go into my argument, what maybe he's trying to argue. Y'all, there are other ways to see this. Okay, there are people who see Lady Windemere as a much more redeemable character. There are people who have written about Lord Darlington being problematic. They don't see him as, somebody who is caring or observant. There's all these different ways to take it. The key with this essay, because they're asking you to write about characters and they're asking you to write about society, is whatever you notice about the values of these characters, however you interpret these characters, you have to tie it back to social commentary. And that, in a satirical FRQ, in a satirical piece, that's the key. Okay, you have to tie it back to the commentary. You have to tie it back to the observations the author's trying to make. And if you don't do that, if you can't make that jump from what's on the page to the commentary beneath it, you're going to stay on the lower end of the essays, of the rubric, because they are expecting you to be able to make that jump. So over the next few days, we're going to continue to work with satire, and we'll continue to work with it throughout the rest of the school year. And it's challenging, y'all. It really is. So save your notes on this FRQ. We're going to keep looking at FRQs next week. And then on Schoology is also the PowerPoint about Oscar Wilde, satire, and other elements of humor that you'll probably want to look through. Have a good day.